Let's talk about Sadia Khan, the con artist. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. Today I want to talk about Sadia Khan, Sadia the con artist, Sadia Khan, also known as Sadia Psychology. This was a highly requested video. I actually did just like a really quick TikTok just about some of the red flags that I had seen in Sadia Khan, Sadia Psychology's content. It did really well on TikTok and a lot of people requested that I do a full YouTube video about this. So let's get into it. Before I get started, my usual disclaimer, I don't know anybody in this video personally. I'm literally basing my observations on the public information that is available to everybody. And honestly, at the end of the day, like the stuff I'm talking about really isn't even about the people in the video. It's actually about the lessons that we can take from celebrities, pop culture, influencers, public figures, and the lessons we can take into our own lives so we can have happier, healthier lives and relationships. If you're not familiar with the Sadia Khan situation, which by the way, I want to make a statement that Sadia Khan apparently in many parts of the world is a very common name. So if you search Sadia Khan, you're going to get a lot of Sadias that come up. So this is the social media influencer that also goes by Sadia Psychology, if you're wondering who I'm talking about. Brief summary of her situation, if you have not heard, she is a pretty popular, I would say, like relationship coach, life coach influencer. She's been on a lot of podcasts. She does a ton of social media content, and she has kind of been exposed as a side chick to another woman's man, and a lot of people are kind of pulling up a lot of ways that she has been scamming people. She's claimed she's a psychologist. A lot of people have found evidence that she has faked a lot of her credentials and things like that. I'm not going to get into all the receipts or playing some of the audio that we have of her conversations with the woman whose fiance she was allegedly cheating with. I say alleged because, again, there's always speculation in these things. There's always opportunities for editing. I do believe that Sadia has admitted that she had this conversation with this woman. Nothing is absolute, and I'm just going by what is available publicly. I'm not going to get into all those things because at the end of the day, like, there's so many videos about that. If you want to look more into these things, I actually would highly recommend, if you want to research more about the Sadia drama, my recommendation would be to go to Abba and Preach's video on this. I think they have a couple videos on it. Abba actually did an interview with Sadia. They did kind of set her up, but like, you know, they had good results. So I would recommend that video and starting there. I tried looking into more information about Sadia and this whole scandal. I ended up finding a lot of content creators that I really wish I hadn't found. There's a lot of misogyny. There's a lot of men out there that are like salivating at the downfall of a woman. A lot of stuff that I kind of wish I could unsee. So I found personally that going to the Abba and Preach video I found was like a good, it was an informative video, but it didn't feel like they were salivating at the downfall of a woman as some of these other content creators clearly have. But I'm going to analyze some of the situations and some of the topics that have come up in this that I think are really important to touch on. I will also say that when it comes to somebody like a Sadia Khan or any other of these big popular content creators, I find it impossible if you have not been following them a lot, which I have not been following Sadia a lot this whole time, just, you know, occasionally when she's kind of come up on my social media feed. It's really kind of impossible to go back and analyze like everything that she said and look for inconsistencies and things like that, because at the end of the day, it's just too much content and I would just spend the rest of my life doing that, and I have better things to do with my life. So I'm going to touch on a few things. Again, I would see Sadia when she would come up in my social media feed, and I have to be honest with you, sometimes I thought she had good takes on things and sometimes I thought she was way off. So I was kind of in the middle about her, relatively neutral. I did think that when her takes were off, they were really off, and some of her takes that were more on seemed a little not exactly revolutionary. But at the end of the day, like, I have in the past, I've actually like ditched or duetted some of her content on TikTok when she did have a message that was good. Again, I didn't really know that much about her. You know, frankly, if just a random person shows up in my social media feed and I happen to like their message, I like to support it. I don't usually dive too much into a person's whole history or anything like that. But the more that I would see her pop up and the more I would see her, you know, on podcast interviews, and I did watch a few like kind of like online debates that she's had with people and things like that to kind of look a little bit more into her, she felt off to me. And I couldn't really put my finger on why she felt off to me. But now that a lot of this stuff has come out, I have a clearer picture as to why it was that she felt off to me. And I want to dive into that. But before I get into this, I'm not going to defend Sadia. Like, I'm not going to defend her behavior. I do think she's a con artist, and I'm going to go into a lot of the reasons why I disagree with a lot of her content. So I'm not supporting her in any way. But I do want to bring up that in my research about this Sadia Khan situation, I'm noticing a really serious trend in a lot of male content creators that are salivating at the opportunity to tear down a woman. And again, I'm not defending her or what she did. And I don't defend con artists, and I am all about the truth. So I am all about, if somebody is being dishonest or someone is scamming someone or someone's a con artist, I'm all about them being exposed. But I'm not really comfortable with the idea of people getting such a thrill out of people's downfall, particularly a whole bunch of men that are just salivating around the downfall of a woman, when at the end of the day, I guarantee you that most of these male content creators that are just so quick to jump at the opportunity to tear down Sadia, I'm willing to bet it would not take too much digging into their personal life to find a whole lot of inconsistencies and to find out that they're probably con artists and scam artists as well. It's very common on social media. And this also goes into, I mentioned in my analysis of Pearl and her content that one of the reasons that I believe that Pearl is getting so extreme in her pro-man, pandering to men, and is like anti any woman is because when you are a woman that is trying to gain a male audience, pander to a male audience, particularly like a manosphere audience, as a woman, you are an outsider trying to pander to that audience. That audience will turn on you in a heartbeat. They're just looking for an opportunity. So as much as somebody like a Pearl has completely submerged herself into the men good, men innocent, men can do no wrong, and women are the bad guys, let's bash women, women are all wrong and they're always the ones that are wrong in that situation, and like this complete anti-woman thing, if Pearl strays from that at all, like even a little bit, she will lose her entire audience. And you see this with Sadia. She wasn't pandering to men as much as like say a Pearl, but I definitely think that she was clearly trying to go for a male audience. She was a little bit more willing to call out men, and she did have some content that was a little bit questionable for if you are trying to win over a male audience. Now, because men have found out about her and, you know, that she's kind of been exposed for not really being the, her words, high value woman that she pretends to be, men are just jumping on her downfall. And I'm gonna tell you right now, and I talked about this when in my video about Pearl, she would be just as easily subjected to this. If you are a woman that is trying to move into a men's space, particularly like a manosphere space or something, they are waiting on your downfall, and they will celebrate your downfall no matter how much you've pandered to them. All of these women out there that, you know, make content that have all these men in their comments, protect this woman at all costs and all this kind of stuff, which frankly, if you are a real man, you should be protecting all women at all costs. That's literally why you're here. Like, you have no other purpose for being here other than to protect women and children, but whatever. But like, if you are a woman who has these men in their comments that are like, protect this woman at all costs because you're making content, because you're pandering to men, please know that those men, all the men in your comments, all the ones that are like praising you for pandering to them, if you even hinted at not being 100% pro-man, if you said something that was maybe pro-woman or something that they didn't like, they will turn on you in a heartbeat. In that world of men, there's no loyalty. Like, men will be loyal to other men, but the men, especially in that manosphere space, will absolutely never be loyal to a woman. I'm not saying that men can't be loyal to women, but like in that manosphere space, that world, they will turn on a woman in a heartbeat. So you have to be aware of that. I believe that pick-me's come in a lot of different forms. I have a video on YouTube going into the different pick-me archetypes, and I have a book, The Recovering Pick-me Journal, that actually goes into all of the pick-me archetypes and stuff. I think pick-me behavior can actually fall into a lot of different categories, and I definitely think that, you know, a Sadia Khan for sure was a pick-me. She was obviously trying to win over a male clientele. I think she tried to make it less obvious by occasionally calling out men and occasionally calling out men's bad behavior, so she didn't look as extreme as like say a Pearl, but it was still very much pick-me behavior. One of the things about Sadia, she is a very striking woman. Like, when you see her, like, you take a double take. I hesitate calling her beautiful because I don't like using that word associated with women that have had massive plastic surgery, because I don't like that association. I don't think we should be calling women that have completely reconstructed their face and bodies beautiful. I don't think that that should be an association at all. So like, if you tell me Kylie Jenner's beautiful, I'll be like, she's not. I will never put like Kylie Jenner or Kim Kardashian or anything in the same category as beautiful. I don't think that those should be associated. But Sadia did have a noticeable appearance. And I would say like Sadia, TheWizardLiz, content creators like that. And I went into this a lot in my video that I did about TheWizardLiz. I don't think that Sadia and TheWizardLiz are the same thing, although they could literally be sisters. I mean, I think that they went to the same plastic surgeon, and I think that they both live in Dubai, or they both have connections to Dubai. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if they went to the same surgeon. I talked about this in my video about TheWizardLiz, and I believe this as well about Sadia Khan or anybody in this situation. I don't believe in taking life advice from women who have basically paid someone to completely cut themselves up like a piece of meat and reconstruct their whole face and body. If your face doesn't move, or you do not have a face or body that is something that could be found in nature, I don't trust you. I mean, again, it is your body to do what you want with it, but like, I don't trust you. I do not believe that you are making good choices with your life. I will admit, and I don't think that every woman that has had plastic surgery is automatically in S work, but I do think it is a big flag for me that there probably is some S work going on, because there's no reason why a woman would need to completely just cut herself up, you know, like a piece of meat and just reconstruct everything, if not to pander to the male gaze. There's no other reason for it. You cannot get away from the fact that that much plastic surgery is not pandering to the corn culture idea of what a woman is supposed to look like, which I find interesting, because people like Sadia are so into shaming men that have porn addictions. And I'll be the first person to say, if a man has a porn addiction, which I believe the low estimate is that 76% of men do. That's the low estimate. It's probably more in the 80s. I think if you have a man that watches porn, he's useless to you. There's no reason to be in a relationship with a man who watches porn. He is a completely useless man to be in a relationship with. I think if you're gonna be in a relationship with a man, he has to heal from that. And it's so common that like, if a man has not actively done something to heal that, there's no point in being in a relationship with him, because you can't be in a real relationship with someone who's an addict. And porn addiction is one of, I think, the worst addictions, and it's one of the most common addictions that men are suffering from nowadays. But I do find it interesting that a woman who is so quick to call men out for having a porn addiction is essentially pandering to the beauty standards that are set by the porn industry. But when you have women like a Sadia Khan, a TheWizardLiz, they've had so much work done, their faces don't even move, they don't actually have like features that are even really found in nature. And don't come for me about different ethnic groups. Just because this plastic surgery is really common in certain other ethnic groups does not mean that that's what women naturally look like in those ethnic groups. This might be controversial, and I'm sure there are exceptions, but you know, I've been on social media for a very long time. I've been in the influencer world for a very long time, and I've just come to the conclusion, I just don't think that any female social media influencer lives in Dubai or travels to Dubai just for fun or for any kind of legitimate reason. I don't know if they're all doing S work, but I think it absolutely is likely that they are. Even if it may not be just like official, like, you know, openly an escort or whatever, I definitely think that they're there for escort tendencies. If you look at the TheWizardLiz situation, and she's basically admitted that she got into the situation that she got into with Landon because he essentially could buy her. He could buy her love and affection, and you know, it really does feel like women who are in Dubai, and look, I don't know a ton about the history of Dubai or anything like that, so there might be people that just live there, and you know, that's just where you live, and you may be completely innocent. But I gotta be honest with you, I think the vast majority of social media influencers that are either living there or visiting there frequently are S workers, and I've yet to be proven wrong about this. So if there are exceptions, my apologies, but I don't think that the exceptions are the rule. And look, I've gotten some criticism online for calling out S work. Look, I never think that S workers or people in that industry should be shamed more than the men who are actively using S workers. There would be no supply if there wasn't a demand. So I have no respect for men that use S workers at all, like none. You know, that said, I really don't believe that the industry is gonna stop unless women stop participating in it. I would love if we could all just like heal men so that they wouldn't participate in that industry, but I just don't see that happening as long as women keep participating in it. I also do not buy, and I've had a lot of people on social media try to tell me that how empowering it is. I don't buy it. You're not gonna convince me. And I gotta be honest, I didn't want to believe this to be true, but unfortunately it's been proven to me so many times in my life. Hoes just have it easier. I'm just gonna say it. Hoes just have it easier. There are so many times in my life that I have been like, if I could just be promiscuous, I would have so many more opportunities. I have had so many opportunities in my life blocked because I can't bring myself to do it. And it's not even a moral thing. Like, if anything, like, I'm just the type of person that like, I don't want strangers to touch me. Like, I'm too much of a germaphobe to sleep around. Like, it's just, I don't have it in me. There's been so many times in my life when, I mean, I was in the entertainment industry. I'm telling you right now, if I was a hoe, I would be one of the most famous people on the planet, and let me tell you. I couldn't bring myself to do it. And working as an influencer and stuff, and, you know, I've been in this game for a long time, and I can tell you right now, the people that are successful as influencers, the people that are making like this like ungodly amounts of money, you really have to have questionable morals. Like, I wish it wasn't true, but you really do. And I firmly believe, after having been like an influencer in this world for so long, and you know, look, I'm not rich, I'm not famous, but I gotta be honest with you, the ones that are, there's just too much evidence that they got that way because of who they're sleeping with. And you know, I really wish it wasn't true. As someone who really does not want to sleep around, I get frustrated with it. And at the end of the day, I get that like it's because of men. Like, men are the ones that set up the system. I get that, but it angers me when women participate in that, because every time a woman participates in it, you set that as the standard, and you basically are sending men the message that, oh, it's acceptable to do it. And as women, because there's enough women in the world that if we all just stood up and said, no, we will not exploit ourselves for financial gain, men wouldn't be able to exploit us for financial gain. And I would love if we could just change men so that the system would change. I just don't think the system's gonna change if we don't change women. Going back to like the Sadia situation. So Sadia Khan supposedly has a mostly male clientele for her relationship coaching business. Apparently she charges, I believe it's like the equivalent of 8,000 American dollars to have an hour coaching session with her. Now look, I worked in a male dominated field for like 15 years of my life. So I was around men a lot, and I'm a very observational person, so I spent a lot of my time studying men. It was kind of like Jane Goodall and the Gorillas in the Mist. It was very much an anthropological time in my life. I'm gonna tell you, I really don't believe that there are men in the world that are gonna pay $8,000 for an hour with a woman to talk to her to get life advice. One thing I did learn about men from years and years and years of working in a male dominated industry is men will always take the advice of a man over the advice of a woman. Even if that woman is incredibly qualified, and I'm not saying Sadia is, but even if that woman is incredibly qualified, knowledgeable, she has experience in that area, like even if she is the authority in that particular field, if a man has a choice between that woman and a man who just like sounds confident but has absolutely no qualifications, maybe no experience or knowledge or anything, even if he's spewing terrible advice but he just sounds confident doing it, 9 times out of 10, and that's being generous, the man is going to take the advice of the man. Men do not go to women for life advice or career advice, relationship advice. They do not. I've seen it so many times. So for Sadia to be charging $8,000 for an hour coaching session, and it's men that are her clientele, there's something else going on there. It's not just talking for an hour for her to give them life advice. Like, there's something else going on there. Again, I don't know, not making accusations. She lives in Dubai. She's had all this plastic surgery done. You know, sometimes you hear something that someone says and you don't have evidence of it, but it answers so many questions and makes so much sense that you're like, there's no way that this isn't true, because it fills in so many blanks of things that just didn't make sense before. I heard this woman on social media, I don't know her name, it was a random clip that popped up that somebody shared from a podcast, so I don't know who the person was that said this originally. But basically that a lot of girls are using OF to launder money for being an escort. And then there were actually people in the comments of that video that they knew women who were life coaches that were laundering money for escort services in the same way. Because you need, I mean, if you're gonna do criminal activity, you typically need a legitimate business in order to explain why there's so much money being exchanged. So that what a lot of these OF girls are doing is if they are going to escort, they have their client basically tip them on OF so that the money all looks like it's legitimate. Now, I don't necessarily think that OF is it seems that legitimate. I think it seems sketchy, but it is a legitimate business, you know, as far as taxes and the government go and everything like that. There were a lot of people that were implying that a lot of these sort of life coaches and things like that, or influencers or things, what they're doing is a similar thing. And again, I don't know, and I'm not accusing Sadia of anything. I don't know this. However, I don't buy that any man is gonna pay $8,000 for an hour with a woman and it's just gonna be talking. If it is, I don't think he went into it thinking that it was. I think he went into it expecting more. Just saying. Again, I don't know. I don't have any evidence of this, but from my own personal experience of dealing with men, and I've dealt with a lot of men over the course of my life, working in a male-dominated industry, and especially a man that has $8,000 to spare for an hour's time with someone, I don't even think most men would pay that for therapy, with an actual licensed therapist, and I'll get into her credentials in a minute, but I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. It doesn't make sense to me. And I know there's been a lot of stories about TheWizardLiz and, you know, how she was making a lot of her money. I gotta be honest, I side-eye Sadia too. I just don't buy it, you know, and maybe I'm wrong, but it is what it is. Okay, let's get into Sadia's credentials. Again, I highly recommend you check out the Ab on Preach video. It goes into a lot of the evidence that she is not actually a psychologist. She does not have a master's degree. She doesn't have a degree in psychology. Now look, I don't necessarily believe that, you know, people that have master's degrees, PhDs, things like that, I don't necessarily think that they give better life advice than people who, you know, maybe just have a high school diploma. You know, I think there's just some things in life when we're talking about life advice and things like that. I think there's some things that you just have to have lived life in order to get, which is one of the reasons why, and I mentioned this in the TheWizardLiz video, I don't think people in their 20s, especially early 20s, really should be giving you life advice because most of them have not lived long enough to really experience enough life. You could make the argument that, you know, if somebody has a PhD in psychology, they might know a lot more about, you know, the technical ways the human mind works. But you could also argue that they've spent so much time in labs or clinics and classrooms and stuff that maybe they haven't actually lived enough life to really, you know what practical life advice would be good for someone. You know, or you could go in the reverse. I don't necessarily think that a person's education level always gives you a clear indication of whether or not they're giving you good advice for any given situation. I think you have to take everything with a grain of salt. The thing that really surprises me about the Sadia situation and her obviously faking her degrees and kind of misrepresenting her credentials that I find strange is that the areas that she's in, as far as being a social media influencer and a relationship coach, having a degree isn't required for that. And I don't know if it was because she was trying to go for a male audience. Maybe she was going for more of the Jordan Peterson audience or something. So she felt like she had to have those credentials to draw in more of a male clientele, or she thought she could charge more for it. I don't know. I'm sure she probably had reasons in her head for doing that. It seems odd to me because it's not something that is required for what she's doing online. And I have seen her, if you watch the Ab on Preach video, she does mention oh, well, I'm just getting called out because I'm a woman and because of my ethnicity, and we're not calling out Matthew Hussey in the same way because he's a white male. I don't know a ton about Matthew Hussey, to be honest with you, but I'm under the impression that he's not telling people that he's some kind of psychologist or that he has a PhD or anything like that. I'm not under the impression that he is misrepresenting his credentials. Now, whether you think he gives good advice or you think he gives bad advice, that's your judgment call. The minute that you start trying to deflect, that's definitely a big sign of a con artist. It's a sign that somebody is being called out for negative behavior. Now, my thing is it's pretty clear that she is lying about her credentials. I think it's strange because I don't think she needs credentials, at least the credentials she's saying she has, in order to do the job she's having. So to me, the lie seems very unnecessary. So again, I'm sure she had reasons in her head why she felt like she had to misrepresent her credentials that way. And, know, we may never know the actual reason because I don't know if she'll ever really fully admit to it or not. But okay, this theory, it's just a theory. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. This is just a theory, and whether it's true or not, I think this is actually a valuable lesson for people, so I'm gonna throw it out there. If my theory about Sadia charging this like exorbitant amount of money for an hour of like coaching with her is actually a front for something else. Just a theory, don't know. I'm just saying I find it skeptical. But if it is a front for something else, her being a psychologist does give it a better cover, right? Like if a man is going to pay that kind of money and he's moving around that kind of money in order to pay her, it does look more legitimate if he's paying someone that is a psychologist, or he can call her a psychologist. That's a possibility. I think it could be a fetish thing. And I'm gonna say this. I think that there is a certain type of man that has a fantasy, maybe fetish, whatever you want to call it, of a woman who is like super intellectual and like super educated and really smart and accomplished and everything, and her submitting to him. Guys don't like to admit to that because most guys know they could never pull that off in real life. So they'll always say, oh, they prefer a woman to like, you know, not be educated, and they would pick a woman, you know, who just, you know, worked at a coffee shop over a woman that had a PhD, like whatever, like as if women that have PhDs don't work in coffee shops. A lot of them have to nowadays, but that's a whole other conversation. And a lot of guys will kind of say that because they know in the end of the day, like they really can't get a woman who's like super highly educated to like kind of submit to him. However, if we're talking about like an S-work situation, a man paying a woman who is pretending to have a very high level of education, but then he pays her and now she basically does what he wants because he's paying her. I think there could be a fetish thing there. I think that that could be part of selling the fantasy, and that could very well be part of it. And again, whether or not this is actually what's going on with Sadia, I have no idea. I don't know her personally. I do think that it would answer a lot of questions, but I don't know this. But I am saying I do firmly believe that this kind of thing is probably happening. And I pointed out, not necessarily to like call out anybody because again, I don't have any evidence of this, but I want women to be aware. Men that are trying to discourage you from getting highly educated are really just doing it because they know that they can't fool a woman who has a higher level of education. But a lot of men have a fantasy about a woman with a high level of education and that man being able to conquer her. I just want women to be aware of a lot of this narrative that is out there with men and this discussion about, you know, how a man would take a woman who just works, you know, at McDonald's, you know, over, you know, a woman who has a high-powered job or something. Like, probably because that man knows that he doesn't have to do much to win over a woman that doesn't have much education, because she's probably more naive, she's probably less able to, you know, read his bullshit. But at the end of the day, most guys have a fantasy about being able to conquer the woman that's probably too smart for him because it's more of an achievement. And most men are going to be drawn to a challenge. But if it's an S-work situation, he gets to pretend that he's conquered that challenge without actually having to conquer the challenge. He just can throw some money at it and kind of create the fantasy. I also want to point out the interesting hypocrisy that is coming out about men in this whole Sadia psychology situation. And again, I'm not defending Sadia, I'm not defending her con artist behavior, but there is a certain hypocrisy in men's behavior that is being very much highlighted by this situation, and I think it's valuable to point out. You hear so many men, particularly manosphere men or your podcast bros or whatever, men just want our peace. We just want peace. Men just want the woman that will give us peace. But if you listen to the audio recording that was leaked of Sadia Khan basically telling off the fiance of the man that she was having this affair with or whatever, the text messages that were exposed between Sadia and this guy that she was, you know, having this affair with, she was a side chick too. Like, Sadia's crazy. Like, she's nuts. She even, well, she's admitted that she has a serious temper and she has trouble controlling her temper and stuff like that. Even in some of these text messages, this guy is like calling out Sadia's kind of like unstable behavior. And I will tell you, when you hear men's reactions to it, you hear it on like the Abba and Preach video, but I've seen other men making comments to this when like Sadia is like telling off this woman, and in some of these text messages and the things that she's saying, these guys are like getting off on this. They are getting so turned on by this whole thing, and the number of guys are like, who wouldn't want Sadia as a side chick, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. These guys are not attracted to peace. They like a woman that's going to be their peace at home, but they will always fantasize about the woman that is their nightmare. Like, the crazier the chick, the more the man is sexually attracted to her. It's basic polarity. And that's why when guys are all like, I want peace, I just want peace. If you are a man's peace, he will cheat with the woman that is absolutely his chaos. Never fails. And I know that there are guys that are like, yeah, because we put women in categories. Well, what does the peaceful woman get sitting at home while the man is going off running around with the woman that is chaos? Because she gets the best of him. She gets to have the fun times with him. She gets his attention. She gets the validation. You know, she probably gets, you know, him at his most fun. Whereas the woman at home, she just gets to, what, birth his kids and deal with his laundry and cook his meals and stuff. Like, she basically becomes the slave. Like, there's no benefit to a woman being a man's peace, because it's the woman who's the man's chaos that gets all the attention and validation. And look, I stand by the fact that, yeah, I think Sadia is a pick-me girl. I do. I think she absolutely is desperate for male attention and male validation. That's why she created her content targeted to men, which I think is a lot more than just life coaching. I think there's something else going on there, because I do not believe that men are paying her the kind of money that she's charging to sit down for life advice. And you can't be in that industry, like an S-worker industry. Again, I don't know that she is. I'm just saying that there's living in Dubai and what she's charging for money and everything. I'm just saying I don't think it's a stretch, but I don't really know. However, you can't be in the S-worker industry and not be a pick-me and pander to men. Like, you can't do it, because like, that's literally your clientele. So, you know, now I did see an interview with Sadia a while ago, and she talked about the fact that her father had multiple wives. In her culture, it's still common for men to have multiple wives. I remember that she said that her mother was her father's second wife. That Sadia said she felt like her mother got more of her father's attention because she was less comfortable with being a multiple wife, whereas her father's other wife was like more comfortable with it. Like, it was kind of more, I mean, this is Sadia's perspective on this. So she wasn't as demanding of Sadia's father's time. So Sadia claims that like her family, her mother's family and kids, got more of her father's attention because of the dynamic. You can't tell me that that didn't set up Sadia to feel like you had to compete for male attention and male validation. I mean, you just can't tell me that that's not at the root of this stuff. I do think that a lot of people that criticize a lot of the things that Sadia says, and I disagree with a lot of the things she says, not to say that I disagree with everything, but I do try to remember that she is looking at the world through the lens of a very different cultural background than, like, you know, my American cultural background. I can still disagree with it, but, you know, she also has a different lived experience. So, you know, I think we have to factor that in. But I do think that there is something to that, of the fact that she seemed to, at least in her perception, grew up with a mother who was a plural wife, but wasn't as comfortable with it. And I think that probably affected Sadia's upbringing and how she deals with men and her relationships in the future. I mean, I don't really see how it couldn't. Which, you know, I mean, I would say, you know, even though in America plural wives are not really like a common thing, it's what's illegal for that to happen, but there are some people that obviously have that. And I do feel like in the manosphere, there's kind of this push for like men to have multiple families and multiple women pregnant, and that's becoming a more common thing, not necessarily the marriages. But I mean, it really does set up the kids to see their mother constantly competing for the father's attention, so that those kids get some of the father. And I really don't think that that sets up a good precedent for the kids at all. Training women to be fighting for male attention is actually really destructive to society. Because look, I know a lot of people don't want to accept this. A lot of people fight this, but this is just the reality of things. When men fight for women, they have to get better. They have to become better people. They have to prove that they are better members of society. They have to prove that they are better protectors and providers, and they have to become better men. When women have to compete for men, women become worse people. They have to become, you know, exploitive of themselves. They have to degrade themselves, because that's how they get male attention. They basically have to become worse people in order to desperately get male attention. Society works better when men have to compete for women and not when women have to compete for men. That's just the reality reality of things. And people can argue all day, it's not fair, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, men competing for women is the natural order of things. Men are supposed to be competitive, they're supposed to be challenged, they're supposed to better themselves to prove that they can be better for women, to prove that they're a better catch than the other men. When women do that, they become worse people. When women have to compete for men, they become side chicks. They become, you know, strippers and do OF and things. And don't tell me that they're just doing it to be independent. You're literally pandering to men for male attention and male validation. Maybe not for a relationship, but for money. That's just the deal. You know, you can be like a good girl all day, or, you know, the perfect virginal wife. That's not gonna get you male attention and male validation. It's the woman walking around in the booty shorts with the BBL and the boob job and, you know, walking around half naked. She's the woman getting the male attention and the male validation. And that's what women are doing nowadays to get that. Is they're cutting themselves up with plastic surgery, they're exploiting themselves sexually, and that's what women are doing to compete for men. I mean, that's the reality of things. I know it's probably gonna get some pushback. I literally had someone on the video that I made on TikTok originally, just kind of like on the Sadia situation, like my first thoughts on it, and they were like, you're obviously trying to get her clients. I'm like, I don't take clients. And I don't even, if a man offered me $8,000 for an hour's coaching session with him, I would absolutely never assume that he just wanted to talk. Like, and more power to you if there's a man out there that wants to pay me $8,000 to sit and listen to him talk for an hour. I'd be more than happy to do that. But like, I don't buy that that's all he would do. I mean, I just would feel like that was a scam. Like, I don't believe that that's really happening, but whatever. Now let's get to the Sadia being a side chick conversation. Now, I've been very vocal in the past about my belief that I believe that cheating is always 1000% the fault of the person who is in the relationship who cheats, who steps outside of the relationship. I'm not big on the whole holding the side chick accountable thing. And not necessarily because I think every instance that a side chick, so to speak, is always innocent, but because I just don't believe, when we're talking about a man cheating with a woman, I just really do not believe that we should be holding women more accountable for men's failures than we're holding men. Okay, we do that too much in our society. I'm not saying that I necessarily think that every side chick is innocent. I just don't believe that we should be putting the focus and blame on the woman when it's a man who is stepping outside of his committed relationship. And look, I will say, and I will be 100% honest about this because I don't need anybody down the road being like, ooh, let's expose her or anything. When I was very young, underage, I got involved with a guy who I ended up finding out was married. I did not know when I got together with him, but I was also very young and I was very naive, and when I found out, I will admit I didn't leave. Should I have? Yes. I know that now. I know that now as an adult, and I know there's a lot of people put the blame on me in that situation. A lot of people were like, you know it's wrong at any age, and that's true. But I will fully acknowledge that I was a very young girl. This was the first guy that I had ever actually dated. He was my first kiss. He very much had me believing that no man would ever love me as much as he loved me, that he was gonna leave his wife, he just needed to find the right time. Now, I know now as a grown adult that like a man who will leave his wife for you is not a catch. Because if he'll leave his wife for you, then he's probably gonna end up doing the same thing to another woman. But like, I was young and I was naive, and look, I'm not justifying it. I held a lot of guilt over that for a long time because a lot of people put the guilt and shame on me, which I will tell you does not help the situation, especially when you're dealing with somebody who's very young, who's very naive, somebody who is heavily under the influence of somebody who is kind of holding your self-esteem in their hands, you know what I mean? You know, it's taken me a long time to accept the fact that I was being manipulated, I was young, that whole thing was not supposed to be my responsibility because he was the adult in that situation. You know, so I probably have more empathy for side chicks than other people may have because I know what it's like to be on that side of the situation and to feel desperate that this relationship has to work, or to feel so invested in this person and to be so convinced that this is the one, and you're so blinded by the reality of things. Like, I know all those things. I do think it's different. I mean, like, if I were to do that same thing at my age now, it would be a whole different situation. So, you know, I think that there's a lot of factors. When I hear about situations where, you know, there's a side chick, did she know he was in a relationship, or he was married, or like, did she know the situation? Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Even if she did know the situation, you don't know what he was telling her. And at the end of the day, are there some women that absolutely are just, you know, awful people, and, you know, they're a side chick, and they know they're a side chick, and they know the deal, and they know what's going on, and, you know, they are part of the problem? Yes. As someone who has been in that situation where I didn't know, and then when I did find out, I made a lot of bad choices because of my youth, my naivete, my insecurity. I have empathy for people that end up in that situation and maybe just don't feel like there's another option, or don't feel like there's any other choice, or falling for, you know, somebody's lines. It's one of the reasons I try to make this content, because I don't want women to have to go through that same situation. I want women to know what the red flags are. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I talk about this. My qualifications are not some PhD, and I'm very open about that. I do get people that will come on social media, and when I'll talk about some things like these relationship topics or things, people are like, what are your qualifications? I find that question ironic, because at a certain extent, it's like, what qualification for giving people life advice would satisfy you? If I were to be like, oh, I have a PhD in psychology, like, would that satisfy you? Like, would I be better at spotting red flags in that situation? Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. For me, I just don't necessarily think that the qualifications argument, I mean, I'm not on board with anybody lying about their qualifications. I think that is very deceptive, and I think that's a huge red flag for anybody. If like their qualifications are very, like, if people aren't willing to like share their qualifications, or they aren't willing to share their life experience, or they're hiding things, or they're, you know, or they're forging documents or things like that, like, that's absolutely manipulative. I'm not justifying that at all. But like, for me, my qualifications are simply, I try to show up on social media. I try to be the person that I needed when I was younger. I try to share the lessons that I had to learn the hard way, because I didn't have someone giving me these lessons and advice, and I didn't have someone teaching me how to spot red flags, and I didn't have someone sitting me down and being like, you deserve better than being treated like this. I didn't have someone that sat me down and said, you deserve better than to be the mistress of a man who's married. I didn't have that. I went through it because I didn't think that I was worthy of better. I'm grateful that I got out when I did. I'm grateful that I got out and moved on. It took me a long time to move on from that. You know, if I am easier on side chicks, it's because I do know how painful it can be being on that side of things when you don't really fully know what it is that you're getting yourself into, and you don't have that knowledge. It does seem like the evidence that is mounting about the Sadia Khan situation and her side chick situation, it seems like she knew. Seems like she was on board with fooling around with this guy that was in a relationship. I don't know if it was just the situation, or if there's other situations, or I don't know. And again, I don't really know. She is in Dubai, and, you know, she is charging an exorbitant amount of money for coaching calls. Again, there's a lot of suspicious stuff going on. I don't really know what the full truth is. I can say this though, that when I was listening to the voicemail of Sadia and the fiance of the man that Sadia is supposedly the side chick for, and these women are arguing, of course, Sadia's flipping out on this whole thing, and, you know, she's getting angry. I do think the other woman seemed at least to be a little bit more calm and collected in the situation, but it's my understanding that she confronted Sadia about the situation. I'm just gonna say this. I don't know this man. I don't know who this man is. I have no idea. I have no clue anything about him. I'm gonna tell you right now, no man is worth this. Like, if you have to fight for a man, if you have to confront a man's side chick or something, like, he is not worth it. I mean, and I don't care who the man is. I don't care. People are going to come to me. He was a billionaire, which I think it's skeptical whether he was or not, but I don't care. Like, no man is worth that. Like, anytime you as a woman feel like you have to fight for a man or fight over a man or something, he's not worth it. There's just no man that exists that is worth you fighting for. Because if a man was worth it, you wouldn't have to fight for him. No man that is worthy of being in your life will ever make you fight for him. And if he's making you fight for him, he's not worth it. That's just the reality of things. I mean, and this is, it's so against the natural order of things. Like, women are not designed to fight for men. Men are designed to fight for women. That's literally the only way it works. And I know everybody wants to act like men and women are the same. That's just not the way society works. It doesn't work that way. I do understand the temptation to confront the woman, but it's never worth it. And you're never gonna get back what it is that you truly want. Like, I mean, you're never gonna get like undoing the infidelity. You know what I mean? Which is really, you know, at the end of the day, it's kind of what we want. You know, we want it to not be true when we get hurt like that, and that's never gonna undo it. So again, I'm not defending Sadia by any means. You know, it seems like she knew he was in a relationship and she was fooling around with him. I always think that it's more the man's fault, but it's not like she looks good in this situation, and I'm not necessarily saying that, you know, she has no accountability in it whatsoever. I just think that we should be holding the man who was cheating more accountable than the woman he was cheating with. But the fact that you have these two women that are confronting each other, when at the end of the day, it's like, it's not about them, it's about him. The fiance should have been confronting him, and if he's still giving Sadia access to him, he's the problem. And, you know, I don't really think there was any reason for these women to confront each other or for them to be fighting over it, because at the end of the day, he's not worth it. And again, I don't care who he is, he's not worth it. And some of this is ironic because one of the topics that I've heard Sadia talk about the most, I think it's kind of maybe the thing that she was kind of most known for, was that she has the perspective that if a woman cheats on a man, that the man should never forgive her because the woman will not respect a man who forgives cheating. Whereas if the man cheats on the woman and she forgives him, then that's okay. I mean, as much as that topic is very ironic considering what we know now about Sadia, I think she's actually half right. We have to remember that men and women are different. We just are. I don't necessarily think that means that there's like different rules with infidelity, but men and women are different. And for men, their deepest need in a relationship is respect. They need to be respected. Men need respect in a relationship more than anything. Now, I believe they should have to earn that respect, but they need respect in a relationship in order to be satisfied. For women, their deepest need in a relationship is safety. Women need safety above everything in a relationship. When you have a woman who cheats on a man and he forgives her, first of all, if she cheated on him, she probably didn't respect him in the first place. Because if you truly respected the man you were in a relationship with, you probably wouldn't have stepped outside the relationship. That said, a man forgiving her, I admit, I think a woman would have a really hard time respecting a man like that. I think a woman would have more respect for a man who was like, no, I won't tolerate that behavior, and walked away. If a woman can't respect a man, the relationship just isn't gonna work because the man deeply needs to be respected in a relationship. However, on the flip side, when a man cheats on a woman, he is actively making her unsafe for so many reasons, and I've gone into this in so many other videos, but like, he is exposing his body to things outside the relationship he could bring back to her, which is putting her health at risk. He is potentially creating other families, which is putting his resources at risk. He's actively being dishonest, which destroys the trust in a relationship, which you can't have safety in a relationship if you don't have trust. So he's not protecting her heart. He's not being trustworthy. A man who's not sexually disciplined cannot be trusted, so he will not be a safe man. A man is actively making a woman unsafe in a relationship by being unfaithful. Therefore, a woman forgiving him is not gonna work because she's not really gonna be able to feel truly safe with him because she won't be able to fully trust him again. So from my perspective, the infidelity is equally bad no matter who is actually committing the infidelity. However, it's just for different reasons. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not saying that relationships and couples can never overcome infidelity, but it's generally my belief that like, if you are unfaithful in a relationship, you can try to make it work if you want, but you're probably just prolonging the inevitable. I know there's gonna be people that are gonna argue that they're the exception and whatever, just because you're the exception doesn't make it a rule. But I do find it ironic considering what we know about Sadia and the fact that she was essentially having an affair with a man in a relationship. The fact that she seems to be okay with a man being unfaithful to a woman because obviously she's actively participating in that. And also Sadia has admitted she grew up in a culture where men were allowed multiple wives. So, I mean, and again, I think that's different than cheating, but I do think it sets up a precedent for, you know, men having multiple women as being more acceptable in the minds of people in that situation. Although I do think that that is different. I just believe that monogamy is really the only situation that really truly works. Sadia and the way she's turned out and the way she's obviously responded to coming from a household of a father that was able to have multiple wives. I mean, I think she's a pretty good example of like why that doesn't work, because I don't think it's best for the kids. And again, not even just having multiple wives, but a lot of these manosphere guys that are, you know, or even your Nick Cannons of the world or whatever, that are going out and creating multiple families. It's not good for the kids. The kids are not growing up in an environment where they're actually valuing relationships and fidelity and things like that, which is a whole other rabbit hole in itself. I have seen some people say that Sadia Khan's support of Andrew Tate was the biggest red flag for them. And honestly, any woman that supports him, I do think is a big red flag. I wasn't really fully aware of how much she supported him. I do know that, like, I think I did know from the past that she had done a podcast with him, but I mean, I don't necessarily think that just because you sit down and have a conversation with someone, you're necessarily supporting them, but I didn't really know the details of that. But I have since then seen a lot of clips of Sadia, you know, really supporting Andrew Tate. And I mean, there's rumors about them having an involvement. I don't really know how true they are. I don't really even want to know, but I will say that, I mean, I definitely think that's a red flag, supporting somebody like him. And again, one of the things with Sadia, with the Tate brothers, with like any of the people, and I've done content on a lot of other social media influencers. I've talked about Sheer7, I've talked about Fresh and Fit, I've talked about a lot of other social media influencers. I want people to notice this, because it's a very consistent theme with a lot of these social media influencers that are really con artists. And I don't think that every social media influencer or every life coach or everybody out there that's trying to give people advice, I don't think everybody is in it for bad intentions, and I don't think everybody is a con artist. Unfortunately, the con artists, they tend to rise to the top. That's just unfortunately the way social media works. But I do want people to realize that what all of these people do consistently, and it's a very common con artist trick, is they throw in some truths. I mean, even some of the people on social media that I think are the most vile, disgusting human beings on the planet have said things that I agree with, because they have to throw in some truths in order to make the lies and make the con more believable. When I look at Sadia's content or any of these other social media influencers that we know now to be con artists, they have stuff in their past that they've said that, you know, it's absolutely normal to agree with. That doesn't mean they're not a con artist, because they'll usually sell you on the things that are truths in order to make themselves look more legit while they're conning you. I mean, it's a very common con artist technique. And on the subject of the support of Andrew Tate, this is a little bit off the Sadia topic, but I didn't want to do a whole new video on Candace Owens. I have a video on here talking about Candace Owens and her hypocrisy, but while we're on the Tate discussion, the Candace Owens and the Brigitte Macron drama that's going on, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about that online, but there's an aspect of it that nobody is talking about, or at least I haven't heard anybody talk about, and it's driving me crazy, so I guess I have to be the person to talk about it. A lot of people are confused as to why Candace Owens is focused so much on Brigitte Macron and possibly being trans, but not on the fact that when Brigitte Macron met her husband Emmanuel Macron, he was 14, 15, that's number's a little fuzzy, and she was like in her 30s, and she was his teacher. We don't know when the relationship started, like we don't really know when things really progressed, but a lot of people are pointing out, like, why is Candace not more focused on the age gap? She's mentioned it, but her main focus is on the trans aspect. And people are confused because I think a lot of people find that the age gap and the possible inappropriate behavior between a teenager and someone in their 30s to be more concerning, which is understandable. Now, we have to factor in, right or wrong, whether you like it or you don't like it. In France, 15 is the legal age of consent. I'm not saying that that's not problematic, but that is what it is, which I think is why Candace has been focused a little bit more on trying to emphasize the 14 aspect, but she's not as focused on the age gap. I believe that one of the main reasons that she's not focused on the age gap, she's focused more on the trans issue, is because Candace Owens, at least to my knowledge, still is supportive of the Tate brothers. She has been very supportive of them in the past, and as far as I know, she still is. The Tate brothers, we know, were targeting girls who were like 15 while they were in their 30s and luring them into their world of S-work, and they were open about manipulating them, trying to take their virginity, to finding girls who were not already in S-work and trying to manipulate them. They were teaching courses on how to manipulate women into getting into that world. As much as I don't think any grown adult should be targeting a teenager, but you could very much argue that two grown adult men in their 30s targeting underage girls to lure them into S-work, I mean, again, I don't really want to get into better or worse, but it's worse than a woman in her 30s who happened to meet a boy that she was teaching in school who was, say, 14 or 15, and it's fuzzy when their relationship actually got started. We don't really know. But years later, when he was a grown adult, they got married and have been married for, I think, like over 20 years now and stuff. I'm not saying that it's not weird. I'm not saying it's not creepy. I'm not saying there isn't maybe something going on there. I don't know. I don't know that much about the Macrons. However, Candace would look like a massive hypocrite focusing on the age gap thing while still supporting the Tate brothers. And I'm kind of shocked that more people aren't making that connection. Again, I have a video on my channel going into Candace Owens and some of her hypocrisies and kind of analyzing her relationship to her husband. I do think anybody that supports the Tate brothers, especially at this point, is suspect because they're clearly con artists. And look, I don't think everybody on social media, I don't think every social media influencer, I don't even think every life coach is a scam artist. I've been scammed by people, not for like huge amounts of money, but you know, I've fallen for the message that somebody had the answers to something that I felt like I needed, and then, you know, gave them some money and then didn't get back in return what I felt like I invested. It's happened. I've learned my lesson from that. It happens to all of us. Even the smartest people, even the most intuitive people, you know, we're all doing the best we can. And there's a lot of people online that are basically selling you that they have the answers to all your problems. And I definitely want you to be more aware that, like, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Please take all the advice you see online with a grain of salt. It includes mine. Like, you know, I'm not sitting here trying to get anybody to follow me blindly. I'm okay if you disagree with what I say. I would prefer that you disagree with me respectfully. I don't like the cheap insults and things like that. I know that that comes with the territory and I've accepted that. But like, at the end of the day, I will say the fact that I've seen so much evidence of people, it was something I didn't know about Sadia before going into this, that she's so triggered by people saying anything about her or disagreeing with her content. Like, she's so triggered, and there's so much evidence of her just like going after people. And like, I gotta be honest, I don't know if some of this is like my background in stand-up comedy, so I'm used to hecklers, and I find like people on the internet, like people are meaner on the internet than like they would be as a heckler in a bar. But at the end of the day, like the heckler in the bar, like you're in the same room with them, like you got to deal with it in the moment, whereas like people online, like you can just block them. So maybe it's just, I don't find them to be as triggering, I guess, because it's just kind of like, it's just the internet, I can block you. Not to say that people don't say things that are insulting sometimes that, you know, don't hit below the belt, but I also know that like fighting back doesn't help that. But the fact that Sadia is so triggered by people disagreeing with her on the internet and goes after people so aggressively, I think it might be a sign that she needs some therapy. And I don't know, she's obviously not really a psychologist. I think she needs one, but I will say the craziest person I've ever met before in my life, like legit lunatic, like been institutionalized, was a psychiatric nurse. So just saying. People in the psychology field, there can be lovely people. I've known lovely people in the psychology field. I've also known some people who were in the psychology field who were crazy. I encourage you to take all the advice you hear online with a grain of salt. Please be mindful of who you follow. I don't think you should follow anybody blindly, and that includes me. I like to think I come to this space with the best of intentions. I want to help you. I want to be the voice of the person that I needed when I was younger, that can just pass on the advice that I've learned from my life experience and hopefully help you, so maybe you don't have to go through the same lessons that I had to learn the hard way. I will admit it does frustrate me that a lot of these people that are obviously con artists make a ton of money. Meanwhile, I do not. Am I bitter about that? Yeah, probably. But you know, it's the nature of the world, and I would rather show up morally and ethically and in a way that I can live with myself at the end of the day than show up and scam people to make money. But I do find it frustrating when I do see some of these content creators who do turn out to be con artists, because it really does make people distrustful of everybody in the online space and make it seem like everybody on here is just out to con you or just out to get your money, or, you know, is here for the wrong reasons. And, you know, I don't think that that's true, and I don't, you know, I hate that that becomes the stereotype, because there are some bad people that do show up, but there's bad people in every space. Yeah, there's probably a lot of other topics I could get into when it comes to Sadia. I also have a video on TheWizardLiz that was really popular and stuff. I don't necessarily think their advice is the same, but I do think there's a similar kind of con going on. I just encourage you to be very mindful of who you're following. I know, because this video is probably going to attract some people from the manosphere space potentially that are going to argue that I'm sitting here with caked on makeup. I'm not. There's no filter. I'm using a good camera, but there's no filter. If you would like to know what my face looks like with absolutely no makeup on whatsoever, with no filters, no Botox, no anything, at 45 years old, I have a makeup tutorial. You can see exactly what I wear in my face. You can see my face with natural lighting and no makeup, and you can see what I look like. I have a bright lipstick on. I don't have my face caked with makeup. I like wearing bright lipstick, so that's what I'm wearing. I'm wearing a high neck to be more modest so that some of you manosphere people that might come to my content won't get offended by my cleavage. I gotta tell you, the men online that are offended by my cleavage have me seriously wondering about some men's sexuality nowadays. Like, I don't know. And for those of you that have been following my content, I have my first indoor plant. This is a real plant. I'm gonna see if I can keep it alive. Let's see if we can keep it alive. She's a palm tree. I've named her Pam the palm. So wish me luck. I'm gonna try to keep her alive. So yeah, if you have enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you have any thoughts on Sadia Khan or any other topics you want me to talk about, this was a highly requested video. I love your video suggestions, so please leave a comment in the comment section below. I love to hear from you. And honestly, any engagement on this channel really does help to boost it in the algorithm so more people can get this message. If you would like to heal your pick-me energy, which will actually really help you to be more aware of people online who are conning you, especially if you were absorbing a lot of relationship content and stuff like that, it really helps you like step into your own power as a woman. I highly recommend to check out my guided journals, the Recovering Pick Me Girl guided journal and the Dark Feminine Energy guided journal. They're both available on Amazon. Details are in the description box below, along with links to all my social media content. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.